What's up guys, BadaBing here. I had this idea for a while and I thought that it would make an interesting video. I present to you the GBLS GDR-15 Dynamic Action System versus the GHK M4 Gas Blowback Rifle. The most realistic AEG against one of the most realistic and reliable gas blowback rifles. Comparing an electric rifle to a gas rifle, it's not going to be easy, as you can probably understand, but I'm going to do it anyway, because why the hell not? It's fun, and besides the fact that one of these runs off batteries, they are practically identical in operation. So, as usual, hook yourself up with a cup of coffee, and let's do this. The GBLS GDR-15 has been around for a couple of years now, and commercially available for a relatively short time span. It's a system that works as an electric blowback air cocking system. Even though it is powered solely by a battery, it features a fully reciprocating bolt carrier, along with a realistic buffer tube with its buffer and recoil spring. The GDR-15 is becoming more and more available as GBLS gains momentum and popularity across the world. There are currently distributors within Asia, Europe, and the US. Upon purchasing this rifle, you also get 1 year warranty, so that's nice. To get the whole picture, you can watch my full review of this weapon system by tapping the link here. GHK establishes their first version, Gas M4, way back in 2014, and in that time it's become one of the most popular choices in gas blowback M4s. As an expansion upon the Western Arms M4 GBBR, the GHK has the best blend of realism and reliability, coupled with a high-performing gas magazine, which is available in green gas and CO2 types. Because it's CO2 ready, this pretty much means it's winterproof. Its ability to take on the higher pressure gas lets it withstand less than favourable environments over other gases such as green gas. The GHK M4 is a total year-round performer. You can also see the review of this rifle by tapping the link here. Now we've got the basics down with these two contenders, let's look at the individual rifle features. The GDR has a 14.5-inch outer barrel, which is surrounded by the Centurion Arms CMR rail. Apart from the PTS furniture, the rest of its features are identical to a regular M4. There are no iron sights that come with this rifle, so it's essentially a blank slate. The receiver features a Cerakote armor black finish, which is a cool feature, but it doesn't have any realistic markings. This is the version 2 Colt trademarked GHK M4 that is licensed by Cybergun. It's in the regular M4 carbine configuration, and as this is my particular rifle, I haven't strayed too far away from its SOP mod origins. I love it as it is. The GHK M4 is available in 3 different barrel lengths, 14.5, 12.5 and 10.5. The receiver finish isn't pretty, but the paint is laid on thick, making it durable. At the time of making, GHK have just updated their M4, again, to include an improved receiver treatment. It looks like a hard anodized finish, which allows it to keep up with the Cerakote competition. The construction on the GDR is excellent. The only part of it that has any sort of play is the stock. Having said that, there is a tiny flex on the receiver, but every AR has this to some extent, so it's not worth worrying about. The receiver pins do not require any tools to remove either, they come out by hand easily. Functionality is also to a high standard. Components are all positive and tactile. As I said in the review, charging the rifle requires more effort as you are priming a spring within that bolt carrier. Dropping the bolt slams the working part shut very quickly and gives off a metallic clack as it does. The GHK M4's build quality is good. While the receiver does have the typical flex, the rest of it is still a rigid platform. Popping the receiver pins out is an easy process too. Speaking of functions, the selector does tend to feel gritty, but it has a reassuringly mechanical, firearmy feel to it. It's actually really good. Charging the rifle is light and smooth. The buffer spring is quite soft. Playing with the GDR for so long and then switching back to this, I tend to snatch back the charging handle expecting the stiff resistance, only for it to bash the end of the buffer tube with the working parts. The internals on the GDR are mostly steel, with the exception of the bolt carrier and the bolt. Throughout my time with it, it has locked back on empty every time, and there appears to be very light wear on the carrier where it grabs onto the bolt catch. I don't think it'll get much worse than this. However, I didn't quite have 20,000 BBs to put through this rifle to purposely look for a failure, nor did I have the time, based on my agreed loan period from GBLS UK. It all looks solid underneath though. I will say that the internals do look intimidatingly complex. It's a stark contrast between this and its opponent. The hop-up adjustment can be found below the chamber itself and can be adjusted using the Allen key provided. It's one of the most annoying things about this rifle, having to disconnect the battery, release the spring tension, remove the bolt, and adjust. Going through the ejection port isn't impossible, but I lose patience trying this way. Originally, this rifle was hitting speeds of 360 to 370 FPS with .2s, so it was far too hot to be used on UK sites. GBLS accepted the bolt carrier back so they can install a lighter spring. This took it down to around 330-ish FPS, much better for UK gaming. The GHK M4 internals have a proven track record. It's all steel, and easily accessible due to it being so open. Any problem is far simpler to identify. As this is the version 2 M4, it makes use of GHK's updated bolt lock system. Since I've had it, the bolt lock has worked every time. To get the BBs off the ground, you can adjust the hop-up by removing the lower rail panel and tuning a wheel. It's super easy, but can be more difficult with aftermarket rails. The chamber itself is made of plastic, something that people choose to upgrade with a metal aftermarket version. But personally, if it isn't broke, I don't see any point in upgrading. The accuracy has always been acceptable. The GHK power output is quite versatile. They have 4 different velocity nozzles, which can deliver your desired FPS. High velocity, standard velocity, 1 joule, and low velocity. I currently have the low velocity nozzle within my M4 at the moment, and this shoots around 300 FPS. The GBLS 60 round magazine shell is surprisingly steel, according to my magnet sticking to the body. It weighs 216 grams, which is light enough to fool you into thinking it's plastic. It uses a thick bolt lock tab on the rear to engage the bolt catch, and the overall construction is solid. At this time, this is the only magazine type available for this system. Give it some time, and there may be some other styles to choose from, if these aren't to your liking. GHK has a wide range of 40 round magazines, green gas versions in the old school style, polymer G5, and GMAG. GHK have been on a weight reducing campaign recently, and their current generation green gas mags are much lighter than their previous models. GBBRs have limitations, and there's no getting away from it. One of those limitations is cold weather. As I mentioned earlier, CO2 magazines are available, and I'd say they would be mandatory if you live in a part of the world where it's close to or below freezing. Another option would be the famous Devil Hunter modification. This can be performed to both CO2 and green gas magazines, so that they can be charged directly like a regular green gas mag, but with CO2. Those options make the GHK M4 system super versatile and a true year-round skirmish rifle. With a 10-second charge of propane firing a shot every second, within a controlled environment, the GHK M4 green gas tank was able to put out 185 shots. This means nothing in the real world. You wouldn't fire that slowly or be expected to refill BBs without topping up the gas, but this just lets you know of its baseline. Recoil. Yep, this is something I wanted to see, which delivers more recoil. The GDR-15 recoil is the best I've experienced from an electric gun. You get a definitive recoil sensation from the bolt, as it's using an electric system to wind back the working parts and recocking the action. The cycle is surprisingly sharp for what it is. It's a good feedback, but it's not heavy. The GDR can be upgraded with a heavier spring and/or heavy buffer. I should add that the gearbox and the motor are rated for its own recoil assembly. Not only would it void your warranty if you upgrade with a heavy recoil kit, but the increased stress on the working parts may cause breakages down the road. Recoil-savvy airsofter has increased the recoil on his GDR, so be sure to check out his channel and see his progress. Yeah, it's no surprise the GHK has a harder kick than the GDR. The instantaneous recoil on the account of the gas power and heavier bolt delivers a recoil performance the GDR cannot match. The feel of the GHK M4's recoil isn't the strongest in the gas blowback world, but for a stock GBBR, it's perfect, because it gives you the best of both worlds. A crisp shove in your shoulder, without it being a detriment to its efficiency. It's also something that can be upgraded with a stronger spring and a heavyweight buffer, if you really want to push it further for realism. Personally, I think it's great as it is. The shooting action. Despite being powered in different ways, the basic operations are identical. The GDR's cyclic action, while retaining elements of a gas blowback system, it has a gritty mechanical gearbox feel during firing. There's no getting away from that, it's just how it is. The rest of its firing characteristics continue to be positive, consistent recoil, bolt lock, and so on. I said it in my review, and I'll say it again. The trigger is the worst thing about this rifle. It's so heavy, not enjoyable at all. Snapping off rapid semi-auto shots requires practice for sure. Now, recent batches are reported to have much lighter weight triggers, and that's great, but the sample I had was a right dog. Fully automatic performance feels precise, the rate of fire remaining stable, even though it feels as if cooldown is just about to wash over you, but it never does. So it keeps on rattling. It rattles away at your shoulder with a realistic tempo. The GHK M4 is simply a dream to shoot. I could go on about the slickness of the version 2 bolt that far excels over its predecessor, but I think my main review speaks for itself. Of course, the trigger is going to be better, with a short light take-up, clear wall, and tactile reset. It's a lot easier to pick up and use. Fully auto performance on the GHK is fine, although it's not known for its higher resistance to cooldown like their AKs are when it comes to automatic. Sometimes those seem to chatter off a 40-round mag like they're being fed by an HPA line. The M4 system can comfortably burn off a magazine on a single burst. The magazines are excellent at this. However, as this is the type of rifle that it is, fully auto is not what you would be using on the field, much in the same way soldiers don't. Accuracy. Electric guns tend to plant their BBs in a consistent order over gas guns, so the accuracy is bound to deliver in favour of the GDR, right? Well, yes and no. It's true their chamber, as awful as it is to get to and calibrate, it's still quite stable. Once an acceptable adjustment has been set, it's quite on the ball. Using 0.3 BBs, it places the groupings in tight clusters on the paper, although there's still a coning fashion to those placements. I think it's an acceptable score. Room for improvement, of course. However, I was happy enough with its performance to take it to a game and feel confident. The GHK M4 can shoot well. Now, as it runs off gas, there's only a finite amount of gas pressure that it can dispatch at consistent levels, and this will affect its accuracy results. Don't let this put you off. It's just how it goes with these things. But generally, you will only see the difference after a few magazine reloads of BBs without topping up the gas. Because it only has a 40 round capacity, players will use heavier BBs than what is typically used by AEG users. I never use BBs lighter than 0.3s, for example. Heavier rounds will provide a stable flight path and compress the groupings. So here we can see how well the GHK did using the same ammo as the GDR. Not a whole lot in it, right? The M4 landed its shots in the upper left quadrant of the paper. Either rifle is no better or worse in the subject of comparison, so they're both winners here. The GBLS GDR-15 Dynamic Action System versus the GHK M4 GBBR. We've talked about the individual rifles for long enough, so let's get the pros and cons together and see what's what. The GDR-15 offers you mostly everything a gas blowback rifle does. Mostly. Construction is solid. Cerakote finish is another neat element. Functional components are all super tactile. The 60 round mags are also well built and lightweight. The hop-up is stable, with the compatibility of AEG buckings and inner barrels. Its accuracy is acceptable. Disregarding the top shell-ejecting M4, it is the most realistic of all electric guns with its dynamic action system. Without a battery, it's pretty much a bolt-action rifle, which is cool. It accepts AEG rail handguards, it comes with a limited 12-month warranty, and, as I say in its review, it has the advantage of dealers and service centres. The disadvantages to this platform is very expensive. Accessing and adjusting the hop-up is awkward and time-consuming. The motor grip can be replaced, but it's not a simple bolt-on job like a gas M4. The trigger has been known to have a heavier pull, case in point this rifle. Aftermarket upgrades, for the time being, do not exist, as far as I'm aware. Internals are mostly proprietary. Spare parts can only be found by going through your GBLS dealer, and may not be available at your favourite online store, so you may have or may not have issues finding the spares you require once your warranty has expired. And lastly, did I mention it's expensive? $1,600 for one of these. The magazines aren't that much cheaper than gas blowback mags either. You'd be looking at a hole in your wallet to the size of £1,900 by the time you've bought 6 spare magazines and a battery. Then you're going to want to put stuff on it to make it look a little less boring and a tad more functional. The devastation this thing would leave on your bank account could see your children not eating for a while. The lesser negatives? I don't like the look of the rifle. It's very much living in 2019 in regards to its rail system. I'd much prefer the old front iron sight post, plastic carbine foregrips, and a carry handle, but I think I'm in the minority on that one. The trade markings as well don't look particularly very good. I guess it's something GBLS take pride in, stamping their own mark on their flagship rifle, so I can't blame them for that. The GHK M4 version 2 gas blowback rifle. It has a solid construction, which utilizes a CNC steel bolt carrier and steel lower fire control parts. The recoil for a stock rifle is impressive. Its trigger performance is excellent. You get a lot of versatility with its magazine types and gas sources. You've got a great safety net when it comes to spare part support, Simoon stocking everything you need directly from GHK. Like the GBLS and every other electric gun, it uses AEG spec inner barrels and hop-up buckings, but that can also be a negative if you prefer the VSR type. There are a number of aftermarket upgrades available. It can accept real AR pistol grips, and finally, it has the best blend of realism and rugged dependability of any gas M4. When people ask, what's the best gas blowback M4? More often than not, you'll hear people say GHK or TM, and they're right. Now, there's not much to say in regards to negatives, but fair is fair. In the past, the paint job on these M4s was quite awful. Its black paint is plastered over the receiver rather thick. Having said that, it does have a resistance to deep scratching that would expose shiny metal, so I guess that's a positive depending on how you look at it. As I said earlier, the finish has been improved, so all units released in 2019 onwards will have a better quality. The receiver itself can have some minor casting flaws here and there. It's also a cast receiver, so it's not going to be amazingly strong. The version 2 rifle itself is expensive in comparison to other gas blowback competitors at £550 at the least. Magazines will also cost you a pretty penny, ranging from £50 to over £60 for the CO2. So say you'd want 6 G-mags to go with the one that came with the rifle, and those are £55 a piece. You'd be staring into a shallower hole in your wallet to the tune of £900 with shipping. That's the pros and cons out of the way, so which one would I choose? In my review of the GDR, I ended it by asking the question, is it good enough to serve as a replacement to my gas blowback rifles? Now, I didn't know the answer to that question at the time, or that may have been deliberate, but I've got the answer now. The answer is no. No way. I'd choose the GHK M4. There are loads of reasons why the GDR would make sense. The realistic actions, its renewable power source, the 60-round magazines, and the fact that harsh temperatures aren't typically going to affect it. Regardless of those facts, I'd still lust after a good gas blowback rifle. You may have come to a different conclusion, but here are my list of reasons for my choice. Number 1. It's still an AEG. I've had the opportunity to use the GDR-15 in-game, and it performed very well. It produced an elevated experience which no other electric gun that I've used could hope to match. So what's the problem? No problem. None at all. That's the thing. It doesn't give me a challenge like using a gas blowback rifle. With the GDR, I had the safety of a roomy 60-round mag and the comfortability of being able to fire bursts without worrying about wasting precious ammo and cooldown possibly being a factor. Despite its dynamic action system, at its core, it still felt like an AEG, only with the bolt locking back as part of its disguise. It reminded me of my old Systema M4 PTW and why I would usually leave it at home. It was basically too perfect. It was good at hitting what I was aiming at with very few rounds. If you're like me and use something like that for long enough, it gets boring. That's why I've left AEGs behind in the first place. They're just too easy. Reason 2. Working around a gas blowback rifle is simpler. Comparing to the GBLS, any problems lurking around the internals are easy to identify and resolve with minimal costs. That and there are far fewer components to worry about. You wouldn't have to send it away to get it repaired either, and in doing the techie stuff yourself, it can be fun in itself. Reason 3, it cycles that much quicker than the GBLS. Shooting the GHK in rapid succession is so much easier, and I get more enjoyment using it than the GDR. Running double taps is effortless. The GDR just can't match it. Furthermore, the authentic trigger break and reset is the icing on the cake. These characteristics all come together to make that delightfully crisp recoil with every shot. Reason 4 comes down to the cost. Cool to own, for sure, but I would really struggle handing over the cash, especially for something which, to me, doesn't look appealing at all. If it were tricked out as a cool BCM, or perhaps even a slick-looking KAC SR-15, it would certainly help the justification to hand over the dough in that scenario. It would need to be gorgeous, and it's just not. Sure, it may be a game changer when you look at it from an AEG perspective, but when you look at it from a GBBR point of view, I think to myself and say, So what that it has a battery that's good for a couple of thousand rounds before you have to juice it up again. I could have an extra grand in my back pocket that I could put towards a half-decent set of night vision by going with its opponent, and it'll do the exact same thing. Well, apart from run for 2,000 rounds before regassing, obviously. After buying the M4 and all of its gas mags you'd need, the accumulation of gas running costs won't match the price tag of the GDR for at least a few years. And that's if you're paying the premium for airsoft gas and not including the far cheaper alternative of refilling your own propane or CO2 tanks. The final reason why I choose the GHK M4? It sounds so much better. I've asked airsofters if they would be interested in buying a GDR-15, and a high percentage of them said no. Most of them could not warrant spending the cash on something that could be matched for a fraction of the cost, noting that if it was competitively priced, something not too far away from a TM next-gen recoil gun, it would perhaps be an easier pill to swallow, and thus gain more popularity within the airsoft community. Other people registered interest in buying it, but only on the grounds that it would have to be cheaper in order to have any real value to them. In my opinion, this is the best direction AEGs have evolved to. GBLS have done incredibly well by making a hybrid of electric and gas. Well, without the gas, obviously. This ought to make every other electric gun design obsolete, as long as it's affordable. This could be the greatest innovation ever. They need to put this concept into other weapon types. Imagine it, AKs, MP5s, G3s, you name it. This needs to happen. I've seen a few comments from people saying that a product like the GDR-15 will make gas blowback rifles obsolete. What do I think? Now that's just crazy talk. Just look at that old Marui Man video. We all thought we'd never see players wearing scuba tanks ever again. Now look what's happened. They're everywhere. Even if the GDR were to come down in price to a point where more people could afford it, I still don't think it would completely replace gas rifles. There's more to them than just their enjoyable recoil, instantaneous response, and the compressed gas and mag design. They represent an edge of realism that electrics cannot hope to achieve. Sitting down to clean the internals of an AEG, to me, is one of the most arduous and stressful experiences known to man, whereas sitting down to clean one of these, in the company of a mug of coffee, is a million times more relaxing, and takes a fraction of the time. What do you think? What would you choose? Let me know down below. GBLS UK provided the GDR-15 for the review, and they're a great bunch of guys. So thank you to them for the support, and thanks to you guys for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you did, let me know by hitting the like. If you haven't already done so, why not subscribe and become notified when my next video goes live. For regular updates, you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram. Take it steady, my friends. Catch you in a bit.